Sorry, no live audience for the podcast. What? Actually, you know what, on second thought, you seem pretty cool. We got a special guest upstairs, but you literally can't get offended by anything. If you're down with that, come on up. Let's have some fun. They're waiting for us right upstairs, so let's get started.
All right, now we're live.
Hey everyone, welcome to the first special one of two. Next week will also be a special episode.
Technically episode 6, though.
And technically episode 6, but we're joined by our special guest, assistant professor at the College of Psychology at Nova Southeastern University, Dr. James Munoz.
Yes.
Welcome. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So, Dr. Munoz was one of my research mentors when I was at Nova. And definitely when I was in his class, I said, yeah, this is the first cool person I think I've actually met in science. I was like, man, this guy comes in, he swears, he doesn't care, and he's just trying to teach you the best ways to remember neuroscience concepts.
Now that you said where I work, I'm going to refute that and say none of that is true.
None of that is true. It's all hearsay.
Can't confirm or deny.
No confirmation or denial. I was in college too, so it's like, you know, my memory at that point is like definitely admissible in court.
Yeah, we're talking about many years ago. It might not be true now.
That's right.
Right, but needless to say though, it's like seriously how he taught it. And me now I'm teaching myself and I'm a TA at my university. I try to put concepts over in a way that undergraduates understand, not that make you sound smart or fancy and that sort of thing. And I think that's some of the, you know, the bullshit that has to come out a little bit.
Right.
So thank you for that.
You got it. Man. My pleasure.
Thank you. So, Dr. Munoz, first question, sort of how did you even get involved in science?
Yeah, you tell me if I'm taking too long, but right,
Go for it.
Right, the beginning of the beginning of the story is I hated school. I hated high school. I was miserable in high school. I knew I didn't want to go to college. I couldn't quite picture myself. I never could picture myself going to college. Couldn't picture myself doing any kind of job that had a college degree because kind of like geese. I imprinted young, and I was like, these are the kind of jobs I can do, whatever I see around me, kind of thing. And so I hated school to the point where I signed my enlistment papers for the Air Force when I was 17. I had to have my parents' signature because I wanted a guaranteed departure date when I graduated high school. So my junior and senior year, I had already signed my paperwork during my junior year. So the recruiter told me all I had to do was get a C to pass, and go in. I was like, great. So that was my bar, right? It was just graduate.
Yeah.
And that's what I aimed for. The highest math I took was algebra, which blows my mind that my daughter is, she just finished algebra in the 8th grade, whereas I took algebra as my highest math class in the 10th grade, and I failed. But the teacher passed me because he knew my mother and said, I'm going to, only because I know your mother, I'm going to give you a D. And I was like, thanks, and so I pushed through. My plan was 20 years in the military and retire. And that was my plan for 2 years, right? And then I go in, and I'm not even off the bus yet for basic training, and I'm looking around, just kind of thinking maybe there's something else for me, maybe there's something else, and I didn't know what. And I just remember that the drill instructor scared the piss out of me more than anybody else has ever scared me in my life. Anytime this guy came around, I was terrified. I was shaking. And then one day I see this guy walk up to him, and I see him come to attention and salute this guy the way we had to salute him and address him. And I was like, well, who's that guy? Yeah. And that's when I learned the difference between an officer and enlisted people. And, to be an officer, you have to have a college education. And so then I started thinking, well, maybe I'll get out and I'll go to college. And I'll be, and if I want to come back in, I'll come back in as an officer. And if not, then whatever. So I got out, and it was a really hard adjustment. I stumbled a lot. I ultimately attended 7 different colleges before I graduated. And I moved around a lot with some Air Force friends that got out with me, and they were my total support. I never would have made it throughout college without them. So, first lesson is surround yourself with good people, because, the people you surround yourself are the ones that make the biggest impact in your life and drive and all that. And they're the ones who push me through. So I ended up, finishing college, and then I just wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I worked full time, many different jobs throughout college, everything from a chat line operator to a 911 dispatcher and billing for a trucking company and a busboy, a server. And
Time out. What kind of chat line?
Yeah. So in back in the 80s, there was a commercial I used to run all the time on USA called Rhonda's Up All Night, and I somehow stumbled onto a job, working for them as a supervisor, funny enough, of the line, right? We had these in-house psychics and at-home chat line, and my job was to make sure that they didn't say anything that was going to get us arrested.
Oh,
pretty.
That's wild.
Yeah, and I eventually, I stumbled through college a lot, and I changed my major also 7 times. And I started out as a history major, and my history professor's like, don't do history, man. And I switched to he's like, I'm only teaching at night because I can't make enough money off of my day job, and as a historian, he goes, and I was like, all right, so I switched. I went to sociology, and then my sociology professor's like, don't do sociology, man. I went to Columbia University. I'm Ivy League educated. I teach at a community college, and I live with my mother. And I was like, all right. So
argument.
So I kept switching, and then finally my advisor was like, I'm not going to change your major until you do an internship. And that's the best thing anybody ever did for me. Made me do an internship, because there's no job that actually reflects what a college degree is like. Nothing, There's no job where they're like, open your books at chapter 3. The work is so different. So I landed an internship. It wasn't the one I wanted, but it was a neuroscience lab, and I fell in love with it. And it would changed my life. I was like, I want to do neuroscience. So I just kind of stumbled along that pathway until I got here.
Yeah. And I mean, modest as that is, but you also went to Tulane for your education, which is a really, really solid neuroscience
I did,
program.
but I was a late bloomer. I was 30 years old by the time I started grad school. So it took me a long, I had a hard adjustment after the Air Force, and assimilating into college. I kind of felt like I don't want to talk to these kids. They all have silver spoons in their mouth. They're all complaining about stupid stuff, and I was like, which is why you see me get riled up in class when somebody's like, I couldn't make it to class because it was raining, or my tummy hurt, so I missed the exam. And I'm like, whoa, what is that? You don't get that kind of excuse in the military or anything. So I was like, no. This is what if this was your interview to Harvard Med School today? Would you have missed the interview because you had a bellyache? No, it doesn't matter if you have diarrhea. You're gonna be there, right? This is your one shot. Yeah.
Yep.
So you do what you got to do, right? And that's and it's all about persistence, right? It's not about how smart you are, because I can tell you there were 3 of us that went to Tulane. Three people in my neuroscience program when I started at Tulane, and the other 2 were way smarter than me. I was the only one who finished the program, though. And they ended up realizing it just wasn't for them. And, one of them was just having problems getting his experiments to work, and not lack of trying. Things just 5 years, and didn't have his first vocation, and realized maybe it's time to move on. So he went to another graduate program. I think he landed on his feet in the end. But for me, it was just about persistence. Like, I know my alternatives. I'm not going back in the military. I'm not going back to any of the jobs I had. I couldn't see any of them as a career. Yeah. So for me, it was. This is the best road for me. So I just kept pushing forward.
Yeah. That's why I really wanted to have you on the podcast, because I feel like half the time when I say, I'm having a neuroscientist on the podcast, people are like, oh yeah, this nerd, right? And he's like, oh, I wanted to be a neuroscientist my whole life, right? And that is just not your experience. And I think that's actually more people than get credit for in science. Mm-hmm. That that have that sort of way. And I think it's really, really good, really, really refreshing to have that, because it's like real world experience. Because again, it's a little less of that coddling and stuff in undergrad, and so when you're teaching, it's like, what? No, I have to go through 10 times worse than this. What's your excuse?
That's you know, it's all relative, right? We all have our own challenges,
Yeah.
and we don't know what other people are going through, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes you just want to look at people and just like slap them, right?
Yeah.
So you know, what are you getting out of life? What do you want out of life? You know, you know, but it's a very real thing for me. This idea of like it would, you know, it's raining torrentially out there, right? I could have easily canceled on him. I don't feel good driving in the rain, but
Yeah.
and people don't come to class sometimes because it's raining, right?
Yeah.
But well, again, would you skip out on your interview if it was raining, right? You know, putting these things into different perspective. No, you gotta be aggressive. You gotta be positive about it. You've got to make it happen, right? And you're gonna get out of something what you put into it, and it tells you right there. They're not putting the same thing into a lecture as they're putting into an interview because they're like, oh, this is just a lecture. It's not that important if I miss it. Well, then you're already setting yourself up to not get that much out of it, right?
Yep.
So yeah, it's real life, baby.
Yeah, that's it's and yeah, that's like I think that's really really good, and that's something that again you and other professors at the university, you guys really instilled that in me, where I was like, yeah, I might not be the smartest in this room, but I gotta put effort. You know, I'm just like I'm gonna put in and see what I can do and what I can get out of these opportunities, because it's like they don't always come up and they don't always work out. You know.
Right. I try to instill these lessons in different ways in my kids. Like, you know, my son, you know, doesn't like being in the rain sometimes. Like, and I'm like, yeah, we're gonna get out and run through the rain and do something. And he's like, but it's raining. And I'm like, yeah, it's water, man. You've been in a pool, you've been in the beach, it's water, right? It's not lightning. I'm not gonna put my son out in lightning, right? But if it's raining, I'm like, let's do it. But yeah, you know, I remember like when I was in high school, you know, I played football my first couple of years, and first time we're out there and it's thundering, raining, and I'm like, well, I guess we're staying out here, right? Because that's what you play
That's what
football
you
in
do.
the rain,
Yeah.
right? And then I was running cross country my last couple of years in track. And I remember thinking one day we wouldn't have practice because we're not going to run in the rain, right? That's stupid. And my friend's like, why not? And I was like, well, I guess we're going to run in the rain. And then I go into the Air Force, and you know, my job. I tried to convince one of my buddies to join the Air Force with me, and he's like, wait a second. So you're going to do a job that you're going to be outside when it's summer and outside when it's winter, but I could get the same pay if I take a job that works in the air condition in the Air Force. I was like, yeah. that's right.
Yes.
and you know what they do in the Air Force when it rains? Nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah, you still got to be at your post, right? You still got to do your job, and you just stand out there in the rain, and it doesn't matter, right? If you die, well, they'll put somebody else out there, but you know, they'll give your parents $20,000 and move on with life. But you know, it's like, all right, so you know, try to push through these things if you really want something, right? You want to do something. And with my daughter, I recently read this thing. Somebody had asked this guy who went to Harvard, you know, how do I get into the Ivy League? You know, what do I have to do? And he gave a short and sweet, basic thing, and I really liked, and I told her about it, and I said, or you know, he said, he said it's about having a positive attitude. He says when these people are looking at your essays and the kind of questions they're asking you, they're really looking to see, are you building excuses or are you taking responsibility? You know, tell me a challenge you've had in your life and how you overcame it, something like that.
Yeah.
Where are you putting the blame and who's taking the responsibility for you know, your success, right? And that's a big thing. He's like, when I was in high school, you know, the guy says, you know, if I walked in the bathroom and the bathroom stalls were broken, I didn't complain that I went to a shit school or bad school, right? He says, well, I just
that's fine. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
He's like, I organized the club and we did some fundraisers and we donated the money to the school for the purpose of fixing up the school, beautification of the school. He's like, you know, some kids you know, have a bad teacher. They're like, I can't learn anything. You know, this teacher doesn't care. You know, and then why should I try? So they don't. Yep. But he's like, if my teacher only taught me 70%, well, I have internet access. I'm going to learn the other 30%. I'm going to figure out. I guess some kids will put their hoodie on, you know, and tie it and just slump down in the chair and check out. He's like, no, I'm gonna maintain a positive attitude. I'm gonna take responsibility for my own life and push through. And that's the kind of person they're looking for. And I thought it's fantastic, you know.
Yeah, I heard that all the time in undergrad. I'm not sure if you did too, Paul, but it's like, oh, that's the hard professor. You don't want to take them. You get stuck in their class. Drop it. Take it some other time, right?
I did hear that a lot, actually. They're like, you want to take this professor, and this professor. especially when I transferred into FAU, they were like, "Don't take Dr. Brooks' class. Take Dr. Frazier's."
Oh, you're throwing names like that?
Throw names.
Oh,
You're still in the program, man.
it's all right. But
They're not his mentor.
I'm glad that I actually did take Dr. Brooks' class. He was a lot more stern than the other professor, and I think that was better than not taking this class.
Yeah, because it's sort of like the idea you're running from a fight. That's always like my thing. It's like, oh, this is the tough person. I'm not gonna lie. If I have the option and it's like actually just laid out there for me, easy option or tough option, I'd be like, oh, that's real tempting, especially for like classes where it's like I just want to get through it. Medical terminology, what? But if it's that option where it's like, you end up taking the toughest orgo professor or something like that, it's like, all right, I'm in this. I'm not dropping the class. We're gonna fight, right?
Right.
I'm not gonna give up, because that's my thing with like the tough professors. They almost have it in their eye that they want to make you quit. And I think like you want to succeed and do well and keep your GPA up. There's also some credo in not quitting. It's like, because I could see it. They're just like, they're waiting there for you.
A lot of those professors are actually like the low end classes, like the 1,000 level courses where there's 300 plus students in the class.
Yeah, weeding out 101.
Yeah, weeding out 101. It'll get like half the class to quit and change majors.
Oh, you all want to be bio majors? We can change that.
Well, there are some professors that I know take pride in that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I spoke to an adjunct once, and he was telling me how he couldn't wait for the final exam because he was going to destroy these students and knock down. And I was like, why would you take pride in that, man?
Yeah.
If your assessment isn't really testing what you're teaching, then how could you take pride in that? Well, what's the goal there? And
Yeah.
I don't understand that. But so I know there are some assholes out there like that. But for the most part, I honestly don't think they're real weeder courses. It's just this is the material. And you gotta step up and do it, or maybe find another route for you. And sometimes it's just jumping through the hoop, right? Like chemistries, right? All chemistry classes suck ass, right? They're terrible. they're terrible. They're terrible people. The whole thing is all right. It's Dr. Steinbeck. Right?
Exactly. I was like, ooh, but he's not gonna watch this. Don't worry.
Okay, all right. Let's clump them in there too then. All right, so they're all done. They're all, but it's a hoop you got to jump through, right? And so is life. You know what? Sometimes life is like that too. You got to jump through some hoops to get through it and push through, and maybe you'll never see it again once you get through it, right?
Yeah.
And you'll be fine. But yeah, it's about stepping up to the challenge and getting through it. I took chem a couple times in college. Actually 3 before I got through it the first time. The first time was legit my fault. I was moving in with an F, and then I was like, it's time to withdraw. And then the second time, I was actually doing really well, but I got a better paying job that required me to work during the hours of class, and I needed the money, so I had to withdraw that time. The third time was a charm for me, and
there you go.
I made it work. But again, persistence, right? That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, and
it's beyond college, right? This is all life. It's all about persistence.
Yep, it's that idea, because as you said, so sometimes the content I teach A&P. It's like I can't change how many muscles there are. I can't change how many bones there are, and that you need to know origin, insertion, action. Okay, that's just par for this course. All right, I can't make that any easier. You have to memorize it. All right, but yeah, that's. I can't change the.
You ever see the movie Hostel?
Yeah.
Right. They used, for those of you who haven't, right? The premise of it is kind of like, these people kidnap people and then they sell them based on their ethnicity, right? And you can pay so much money and you can torture this kind of person or that kind of person. I was like, I tried to start a little hostel club back when I was teaching A&P and actually, but they were like, no, can't do that.
Oh my goodness. Oh, and I should say to the audience, whether you're on Twitch or on YouTube, if you have a question for Dr. Munoz, put it in the chat and at the end of the podcast, we'll read it and see his take. As you can see, it's like a million things you can ask about.
Multiple choice, please.
No, yeah, right. No, a short answer. What?
True, false.
Yeah. But you said you were in the Air Force. Were you ever overseas, or were
I was, yeah. I was overseas a lot, and so I was, my longest duty station was actually in Germany, and at a base that's now given back to the Germans, but it's Rhein-Main Air Base in Frankfurt.
Nice.
And from there, deployed a lot. So I spent a lot of time in England and just kind of going all around during the Panama invasion. We got activated for that, and it just kind of bounced around everywhere from there. I was also in Honduras for 6 months, which was pure torture. That was in the jungle, and so it was. I'd never camped before the military, and not a big fan of camping because that's my main experience is going through survival school and ground combat training and and all these camping scenarios in the winter when it's so cold, it's just it's miserable, and people drop out left and right because of those kinds of challenges, right? But like I'll tell you another good life lesson, right? Well, one time we were doing this these exercises, and we were out, and it was so cold that we couldn't feel our toes, couldn't feel any, and one of the there were the big path of sharp rocks, and we took off our boots, and one of the guys, because we were stupid, and one of the guys like, I bet we couldn't even feel that if we walked across it. Well, let's try. And so we took off our boots and we walked across the sharp rocks, and we realized our feet got all cut up and we couldn't even feel it. Ooh. And then one of the guys freaked out and he panicked, and guess what happened to him, right? He got washed out.
Yeah.
It's like, you can't. And he's like, anyone else want to complain? Nope. Put my boots back on. I'm good to go. I'll push through this because I know it's gonna get better, right?
Yep.
But in Honduras, we were there for 6 months in the jungle, and living in a tent. We didn't have. We had one hot meal, and that was in the morning.
Wait, how many months?
6 months. And the thing is, when I went there, I didn't know how long I was going to be there.
Oh, yikes.
Zero idea. They just sent me there and attached me to an army unit, so it was just me with an army platoon, and it was miserable because they hate. We're all brothers in arms in the end, right? But when we're together, we always give each other a hard time about what service you're in, right? Here I'm the one lone Air Force guy attached to this army unit, and then it's torture for me, and but I still love them in the end. But we were we didn't know how long we were gonna be there, and the mission took 6 months. 6 months out there living in tents. And we had one hot meal a day that was grits, and after that we ate MREs, and that's it. It was a terrible. So I'm not a big fan of camping. So when my son decided to join the Cub Scouts, and then I became the Cub Scout leader, the den leader, because there was no other person to be the den leader, and then we have to do a camping trip. I'm like, no, we don't. We can stay at a hotel, right? It's Cub Scouts, not Boy Scouts, right? And they're like, no, you gotta stay in a tent. So I called my sister up, and I'm like, I guess he's coming with me. Because my sister is the one who loves camping, right? Oh. And so she has a Taj Mahal tent. She had a portable air conditioner that she brought in the tent.
Wow.
And, the tent was so big, we had 3 full-size, tall, blow-up beds, and we had them in the tent. We had a fan in there as well. I woke up to the smell of bacon and croissants and eggs for breakfast. Remember?
I gotta go camping with you.
right. My sister, not me.
Camping, yeah.
And at one point we had to wake her up at night, that first night, and ask her to turn the AC down because we were too cold. And this was in Florida. In the summer. Guess what the other parents were like? Yeah, all the other parents were miserable. We were like, oh, really? Because we woke up shivering. Yeah.
They're probably like, drop dead.
Not a den leader anymore.
Yeah, right. It's like you learned your lesson.
So how long were you in the military?
I was in 4 years.
4 years?
4 years, yeah. Yeah, my original plan, right, 20 years and retire. But I had a few really good buddies that I made in there. You make the best of friends in the military because you go through experiences that nobody else is going. Like you can say you have buddies in college, right? But you're taking different classes, you're doing different projects, you have different challenges, similar but different challenges, right? Yeah. But in the military, man, you live together, you eat together, you work together, everything's together, right? You all date the same woman because there's only one per every 100 guys, right? So the whole everything you share every experience, right?
Yeah.
And it's And so we got, three of us got out together and went to college together, and we were roommates the whole time, and just kind of stuck to each other and helped each other out. But 4 years, it was a great experience, and if I had to live my life over again, I would do it again. Very proud that I did it. But 2 years would have been fantastic, right? If after 2 years I could have checked out, that would have been great. But it's a 4-year contract. It's not much of an option there.
Yeah. No, that's awesome, and I think that's an avenue that I hear a lot of medical students wanting to take.
Yeah, I think that's a tough job.
Yeah.
I think some of the hardest working people in the military are the physicians. I only had one base that I was only at for about 8 months. I had a physician there, but it was these guys they schedule patients for them every 10 minutes. There's an Air Force base is a city, right? It's a city,
Yeah.
And so you have people that their job in the Air Force is to pick up the trash, right? Go around like garbage men, and you have mailmen. You have everything you have in a city, you have on an Air Force base, and so it's big. We have our own water towers, everything, right, for a lot of these bases. And then you have all the dependents, all the family members that have to be seen by the physician as well. And then and anyone who gets sick. And in the Air Force or in the military in general, you're not allowed to get sick, right? Which is why I also have a hard time when a student tells me they didn't feel well and couldn't come to class, right? I'm like,
Yeah.
Hey, how many people get sick in the military? None, because you're not allowed, right? You still have to report to work, and then when you report to work, then your supervisor, who has probably zero medical training, determines if you need to seek medical help or if you can work. And if they feel like you can work, well, guess what? You go to work that day.
Yep.
And if they feel you need medical help, well, then you're really fucked, because then you have to go get medical help. And that's the worst case scenario, right? If they send you to the clinic, like I got sent to a clinic once.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to go because I'd heard about it and I heard about the experience. So you go to the clinic, and guess who's the lowest on the totem pole, right? Is the sick call person, not the ones who had appointments or the deployable people who are have to get processed out for deployment or dependents, right? So then it's you at the end, right? So when are they going to squeeze you in? At the end of the day, right? And so you're going to sit there for your 8 to 10 hour shift while the physician sees everybody, and then they're going to get to you. And then all they can do is clear you for that day, unless you have to be hospitalized. They can only clear you for that day. So you're going to spend more time sitting in the clinic than you would have if you just got to work your shift, right? And so you learn, all right, I'm not sick, right?
Yeah.
I can go to work. So,
Am I sick, or is it not worth the 8 to 10 hours that I'll have to sit here?
right. Yeah. So that's how life is in the military. I think it had a positive influence on me on the end, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because I realized, I'm always going to be able to make it to work, right? There's nothing that can keep me from work, and I've stepped up to those challenges, right? My first semester at NSU, right? My dad had a major stroke and was paralyzed, and they called me at 1 a.m, and I went there and I stayed at the hospital until 7, and then I went in and I taught my lectures, taught my labs. Then I went back to the hospital and I did that over and over, taking care of him, getting him back, right? Getting him back home. And then my son was also born my first semester, and went to the hospital. I didn't miss a lecture or lab, right? Because that's that sense of responsibility that you get beat into you.
Yep.
But that goes a long way, because again, persistence, right? That's what it all comes back to.
Yeah. And that certainly helps when you're going through a grad program. We've spoken before on the podcast about failures in your experiments, failures in your PhD. There's plenty. And if you take that as an excuse to give up, you ain't getting through it.
Dude, look at the attrition rate for the biomedical sciences, right? I don't know if it's still the same, but it's probably hasn't changed much. Probably only about 30%, 35% finish a PhD program that started in this country in biomedical sciences. That tells you it's about persistence, right? Part of it's because the system sucks. You don't know when you're going to graduate ever until like 6 months before you graduate. And that might be 7 years, might be 5 years, right? You don't know.
Exactly.
6 months of stress.
Yeah, and so you really have no idea when you're going to graduate. It's a tough road, right? And you don't know what's going to happen after that.
Yep.
You don't know how long you're going to be a postdoc. You don't know if you're going to get a faculty position.
Yep.
Even then, only like 30% of postdocs will get
Out of there, yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a tough road, but persistence, baby.
Yeah, I had I had a friend of mine in the PhD program. They defended their dissertation, did all their stuff. Last thing have to do, and the grad college already approved. This is like a big deal now. I don't know if it was when you were writing your dissertation. The grad college has to approve the format of your dissertation.
Yeah, that's the worst part. That's arguably the worst part, right? The paper has to be printed on the margins, the font, and they find every little thing wrong, and it's just editing, and
Yep.
Yeah.
And even when you transfer, now it's like when you transfer from Word to PDF, it changes by 1/4 of an inch, and now it's non-complacent.
Right,
You know,
right.
with its stuff.
It's the hardest document you'll work on that no one's ever going to read.
Exactly. Just bore you to sleep. It's actually, a friend of mine was saying that they had a buddy that was thinking of creating an app for insomniacs.
Yeah.
That all they did was read scientific papers in a soothing voice to put people to sleep. And they're just I said,
Thought I had bad business ideas.
I was like, you know what? With the correct amount of whatever inebriation in your system, that could sound like a good idea. But this friend of mine, they did their whole dissertation, everything's approved, trying to get the signature page signed in a special pen by all the faculty. There was one faculty member that wasn't around. They had to go up to Jupiter because they were supposedly up there. Wasn't there. Came back down to Boca Raton and couldn't find, on vacation. I had to sit there and wait.
Yeah.
You're never out of the woods. Your graduation date is constantly in that balance.
It takes 6 months to get 5 people together in a room. It's tough.
Well, Paul's about to propose his project. He's doing it this summer in a month, Paul.
Yeah. I'm stressed out about it. For the last 2 weeks, I've been rewriting my proposal over and over again.
Yeah.
Just as important as practicing it. You need to practice it in front of some people.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be different than doing it in your head.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep. It's like getting out there and actually doing it.
Yeah, my committee is also like very interesting because I have half of them are biologists and the other half aren't biologists. They like know very little about biology. So I gotta teach the biologists machine learning and then teach the machine learning guys about biology at the same time.
Yeah.
So,
I remember a defining moment with my committee members, and that was when I was doing my annual meeting and talking about like, all right, what do you plan on doing for this next year? Like, what have you done last year? What are you doing this next year? And I had proposed the series of real-time PCR experiments that I had to do. And remember, I'm old. This was, real-time PCR was pretty new.
Yeah.
And one of my committee members was like, I hear people talking about that all the time and saying, now they want to learn, they want to do it, but I don't really understand it. Can you explain it to me? And I went over to the board and I illustrated it. Luckily for me, I'd already planned on doing these experiments anyway. I'd already read through the manual cover to cover and figured out myself. And I illustrated it for him, simply, and just explained it clearly. And he was like, "That's the best explanation of a protocol I've ever heard." He says, "I think it's fantastic." And this guy to this day is a strong supporter of mine. He's when I went on the job market at NSU, he offered me a faculty position at Tulane. He's like, "Yeah, I'll write you a letter, but I'd rather offer you a faculty position here.
Wow.
Come over here and so be ready for that, right? Be ready to explain it to a child."
Yeah,
and
basically.
try that. But back to that business idea. So your friend's business idea, right? Check out the business idea a buddy of mine and I came up with today, right? And so I was telling her about my kids going to summer camp and how they love this one summer camp. And then, I said, my daughter's really excited because she's going to be a counselor in training. And my son was just excited because I let him buy a stuffed animal bear that they had at the bookstore while we were getting the uniforms.
Yeah.
And she was like, she told me, she goes, it's funny because I read beer, that you bought him a beer, and he was happy. And I was like, and then that conversation spiraled into, we should start an adult summer camp, right? Where you can check in from 9 to 3. We'll play drinking games, we'll do drinking games in the pool, drinking games on the boat, drinking games, sports drinking games, and that's a business plan right
That's
there.
a business idea. You know what? I think it's 1 year too late. I think all the adults with all their kids being home from school would have signed up for that summer camp during COVID. They'd be like, I need to go to summer camp.
Right.
Okay? This is professional development. We're
Yeah,
learning team building skills, all right? This is
Marketed as
great.
professional development.
Yeah, team building. I've already got, that's it. This is team building. Man, if you can build a team drunk, you can build a team sober. That's fantastic, though. That's fantastic. Good business idea. So if you want to sponsor that and become a a bankroll that project, let us know. But yeah, no, that's so. If I might ask, what drew you to neuroscience? Of all the things that you've done, there's some really interesting stuff there, including Rhonda.
Yeah, so like when I was an undergrad, we didn't have a neuroscience major at my university yet, right?
Yeah.
The first neuroscience major was undergraduate was at Oberlin in I forget. I think it was 1997 or something like that. And that was also the first neuroscience PhD program offered that same year at Johns Hopkins, although they didn't have an undergrad one yet. And most neuroscience programs that developed after that were only PhD. So the only way to get into neuroscience was as a graduate student, not as an undergrad.
Yep.
And that's largely because a lot of the stuff is so expensive. It's an expensive field of research, and through a lot of technology and innovative kind of developments and finding ways to do things cheaper, the majors moved into undergrads, but it's still the most rapidly growing major in the country. I told you I did an internship, or my advisor made me do an internship, which I think was the best thing that could have happened to me in college. So when I ended up at that neuroscience internship, most of the people there didn't have a degree in neuroscience because it wasn't that much of a thing yet, right?
Yep.
And so I ended up working in this neuroscience lab, but I was working with this postdocs. There were two postdocs that had PhDs in psychology, experimental psychology, and then there was a postdoc who had a PhD in microbiology, one in anatomy. There was a biochemist, and then there were two physicians from Japan that were doing a research year, and so they had come and joined the group. And so when we sat in a meeting, it was amazing, right? You can imagine how when somebody proposed an idea, how by the time everyone pitched in, it was the most well-rounded project ever, right? We also had a pharmacist, but not like a pharmacist that works at Publix, right? One who developed and designed drugs. And so he had this drug that he wanted to test. The psychologist was like, okay, we can run him through these mazes and we can do this kind of learning and see if it's really improving learning and memory. And then the anatomist was like, well, I'd like to look at, in the brain and look for any changes in, inflammation, things like this. And the biochemist was like, I'd like to look at the cell signaling. If there really is improved learning and memory, then, we can do, cell signaling cascades. And so everybody contributed to this thing by the time the project, so in an hour or two meeting, a simple idea turned into this really elaborate project. And so I was very fortunate. I'll tell you this too. There were two of us that were hired at the same time as undergrads. I was hired to work for free as a volunteer, and the other guy was paid. And at the end of the summer, they were like, we're letting him go, and we'd like to keep you on, and we'll offer you a paid position for a year if you'll stay. And I was like, yeah. And it's not, again, smarts or anything. This guy is a professor at Emory now. He was plenty smart.
Yeah.
It was just work ethic, right? And putting in the hours and the time and it. So I ended up staying there a year and a half, and I absolutely love that experience. To date, this is one of my favorite academic kind of experiences that I've had. Is just being in that stimulating environment, and people appreciate that too from the NIH. Like, I was in. So I made a mistake, for me, personal mistake. When I finished undergrad, I went to a graduate program for psychology because I thought I might want to do experimental psychology. And for me, it just wasn't the right fit. And so I was kind of miserable doing this experiments because I wanted to look in the brain to see the changes that we were making happen behaviorally. We were doing like behavioral neuroscience, right? And I was like, but I want to look in the, I don't just want to do the behavior. I want to actually, why not finish it off, right?
Yep.
Like, well, we're not equipped to do that. So that's why I left to go to Tulane and do more gene therapy and neuroscience, right? I was in the Center for Gene Therapy there. And
not to cut you, but I think that's like a really important distinction, because I think a question that was asked on social media was, what's the difference between neuroscience and psychology? Like those things, like they're just like, it's all the brain, right? And I think your description there is really good. Like psychology is the behavior, neuroscience is what's going on in the box.
yeah, I mean, it's a valid argument to say maybe the most important thing is behavior, but not for me. I want to see the changes that underlie the behavior, right?
Yep.
I want something. I want to see something there, and so so I after 2 years in that program, I switched and went to Tulane, right? But it's all about, again, just moving forward, right? Just always moving forward, right? But it was a fantastic experience. I love that internship. And when I interviewed for PhD programs, that was, here's so you guys are in PhD programs, so you probably had similar experiences. But I interviewed at 7 schools. I got into all the schools. And I interviewed with about 14 people at every school for about half an hour each. And every single person I interviewed with at every school asked me about my undergraduate experience at the NIH. They all asked me about that. Tell me what you did at the NIH. How was it there? What kind of stuff were you working on? One person, only one, right? 7 schools times 14 people each interviewing me. Only one person asked me, so I see you've been in graduate school the last 2 years. Tell me about the experiments you've been doing the last 2 years. Only one, right? And NIH is a buzzword, right? That's a door opener.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, it's like, I think it was you pushing this good advice at me where, when I was, for me, like my journey is like, I wanted to be a physician. That's all I wanted to do. When I showed up in Dr. Munoz's class, that's who I was going to be. I wasn't going to do a PhD. And I started, yeah, right? I was like, I don't want money. I choose poverty. But when I went to
like my daughter said once when she was very young, very, very young, like 4 or 5 years old, something like that. She said, my daddy's a doctor too, just the wrong kind of doctor. He doesn't help people.
Yo, kids cut right through it, right? Kids are just like, look, you need to be leveled. Here you go. Oh, you're excited? You got published in Science? Whoop! Yeah, my daddy's not the kind of doctor that helps people. But for me, it was, again, my first research experience was for NOVA, right? They have the independent research. Wasn't even for credit. It was, oh, you want to do research? Come, and we'll see how often you show up, see how good you are, and then we'll make a decision on whether we want to offer you that independent research or not. And so it's that motivation of, I have to earn my stripes here. Okay. I better show up. I better do what I'm supposed to, learn this stuff real quick. And fortunately for me and how I work, there was a lot of seniors in that lab. So once they all graduated, it was, I have an opportunity to be sort of like the person who knows the most in the lab. So I did that, but the internships, again, it was that level where it wasn't until I was out of undergrad, trying to reapply to med programs, that I made the realization that I don't know what it's like to do medicine full time. I know what it's like to do research full time. I like this, right? I can see the rest of my life doing this. And when I made that decision, that's when I started applying to PhD programs.
Yeah, we all make mistakes.
You're still kind of the senior in the lab.
We all make mistakes. That's true. What were you saying, Paul?
I said you're still kind of the senior in the lab.
Yeah, now it's like incidentally that's what happened.
Yeah.
In my PhD lab, when I came over, the 2 PhD students were one was 1 semester away from graduating, the other one was 2 semesters away from graduating. So It was me, and then there's another graduate student. She was a semester off of me, and then there's Paul, and that was all within a year.
Wow. I was in a huge lab, and for me that worked out really well. I did both experiences, right? When I started at Tulane, I had the opposite experience of my first grad program, right? Yeah, I had the total opposite experience. My first rotation, it was me and the PI, and I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I wanted to stay there and get my PhD with him. And then the director was like, you know what? You've been in there a long time. Your first year's almost up. I need you to do one more rotation at least. And I was like, all right. So I went to gene therapy. I went from the poorest lab at Tulane to the richest lab at Tulane. I mean, the poor lab I was in, we didn't even have a complete set of pipetters. I had to go next door and borrow the 1 mil pipette from them, every morning and bring it back. I had to walk down, down the hall to use somebody else's centrifuge. We were using a -80 at the VA across the street. As being in a poor lab, but I didn't know better. And I was happy.
Yeah.
And the experimental questions were fantastic. But then I went to gene therapy, which is like the richest, not only the richest lab at Tulane at the time, it was one of the richest labs in the country. Our operating budget was unreal. As a grad student, I had direct purchasing power, and as long as I wasn't spending over $20,000 a week, I didn't have to ask my PI.
Wow.
He was like, just run it by me. I probably want that. So I used to order stuff just off a whim. Just terrible, right? Because then you can run off tangents all the time. You're always like, I wonder if, let me test it. But I'm not moving towards my degree, right? I'm chasing tangents, and that was a fantastic experience too. But I love being in the big lab because we had several postdocs. There were 11 grad students. Most of them were senior to me, and I was able to learn from them, which I really valued. Being able, because you don't work so much hand in hand with the PI, right? So
Yep.
yeah, it's something to consider when you're, depending on the kind of person you are and the drive you have, right? For me, it was great to have those, senior people that could guide me.
Yeah. That's one thing. Usually I would like it, but but I came in with that expectation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like my mentor now, Paul and I's mentor now, when I came in, he said that. He says, you have a semester, 2 semesters to get this going because people are going to look to you to guide it and have an idea and know what's going on. And I was like, so you mean I have to be a first semester grad student and man, I better get going.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, it was like a really great experience. And my NIH lab was the same way as your gene therapy lab. Mm-hmm. It was because it was a preclinical MRI. So for mice and rats, MRI. Oh my goodness. I mean, it just, the electricity bill to keep those gradients up all the time because it can never shut down. Actually, while I was there, it was in Baltimore, and Christmas in Baltimore, there was an unusual snowstorm that came through, knocked out the power, and all those things are on backup generators. All the labs are on backup generators. Clicked on. Someone, it claims to be up to now from the mechanical people or something, went into National Institute of Drug Abuse, NIDA, went into their lab, their MRI suite, and hit the purge button, which is a big red button that's on a wall, it's do not push.
How do you not push a big red button?
Oh my goodness. Under threat of my PI, he says, I will personally kill you. If you, he says, even if someone is in there with a metal rod in their leg, you pick up the phone, you call me, and I will push that button, okay? I need to decide if that button needs to be pushed. Someone pushed that button. They must have thought it was a reset button.
Yeah.
And that stuff is for that kind of emergency. If someone with a metal rod in their leg goes in and the magnet starts to pull it out of their leg, it destroys those gradients, all those silicon plates that keep the electrical field up. Oh. It shatters them in the most catastrophic way. That was a $250,000 mistake that someone made. Ooh. And because it's the government, who's insuring that? There is no insurance. No. That's just a mistake. And oh my gosh, my mentor was like, didn't happen to our lab because I was here. He was like, I was here making sure no one pushed that button. And yeah, it was really crazy because I said, this is the one time in my life where I'm going to hear, oh, well, we really need a new coil for the rats to make a better resolution. Yeah, it's an $80,000 part that needs to be custom made in Germany. We'll send it out. I was like, government got that money. They got taxpayer money.
Yeah. So you mentioned rod. I'm gonna tell you my rod, right? So I got a big rod in my leg.
Oh.
I got that during a very poorly executed evacuation from Hurricane Katrina when we were living in New Orleans.
Oh.
And so I broke my tibia in 3 and had to have a couple surgeries to fix it. I have 12 pins in there and this big metal plate, and I was a grad student and a veteran, so I went to the VA hospital to get the surgeries done, which the VA hospital, many horrible stories about them and many bad things to say, but in this case, they took care of me. They absolutely took care of me. It was
That's good.
solid.
Yeah.
It was a fantastic experience. Right. And so, I got that taken care of, but I have a stainless steel, 12 stainless steel pins and a big metal plate. When I went on my first job search, my first interview was over at NC State, and I was interviewing there to work in a graduate program that was housed at the veterinary school. It wasn't part of the veterinary school; it was just a graduate, a biological sciences PhD program, and that's happened to be housed in the vet school.
I just go in and
So-
go. I just go.
So yeah. So in there, and there's this dog running around the building. This dog has free reign of the whole facility over there, and he's got this titanium leg. And I'm like, what's the story with the dog? And they're like, he's kind of our mascot. Somebody brought him in. He was hit by a car in front of the vet school, so they brought him in, and so. Nobody identified him, but they fixed him up. They gave him a titanium leg, and we just kind of adopted him here. And he's kind of like our little fish mascot. I was like, wait a second. Yeah, stray dog got a titanium leg? And I went to the VA hospital, and I got a stainless steel. But a stray dog got titanium. I'm like, what the? All right, now it's in perspective.
Yeah, right.
I get it now.
He's here on the total.
Yeah.
Down here.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And I was gonna say, I was like, you with this stainless steel rod, and you're like, man, you must get harassed through airport security more than I do.
You know what's funny and kind of scary at the same time is it did go out the first few times I went through airport security, and not since then.
Okay.
Not since then. I can walk. I walk through there now, and now they use the scanner. So
Yeah.
But I used to, for many years, I walked through the metal detector, and it wasn't going off, and I was like, well, that's weird because it went out the first few times I did this, but not anymore. So I don't know if it's like maybe muscle growth around it, or
Possibly.
or changing a sensitivity to those things. I don't know, but
At least
I'm not gonna ask to be inconvenienced, right? I'm gonna just keep going if they let me go. So.
But you see, I feel like that would be good the first time you go through and it goes off. You're like, oh, at least I used the right material in my leg. Like, that's the confirmation, right?
At least
that
it was steel.
It's steel, for sure, right? They didn't put rubber in there. It's like, it's a plastic.
I got a wooden leg.
They're just like, oh, man, okay, I know it's metal. You go off, even I would be relieved. I'd be like, okay. All right. Let's go, Fernando.
Strip search.
Yeah.
Just puts on the gloves.
Oh, my gosh. My cousin, one of my cousins in Toronto, right after her prom, she, like, night of, they fly, because they're in Canada. They went to Cuba, right? So on vacation. She has her hair all did, which, like, had 100 bobby pins and stuff in it. She's like, there's no way I am taking my hair down to go through this airport, okay? Too much effort. Walks through, beep, 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 goes through. They pat her down, and she's like, no, it's all these bobby pins in my hair. That's what's setting it off. Like, okay, miss. They take her to this cube, this like little plastic cube that's off to the side. And they're like, yeah, we have to search you more thoroughly. I was like, oh my goodness. So she's like, and at this point, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. Their flight's at like 3 a.m. It's like, oh my, that's the last thing you want to do. You finish high school, your senior prom and that sort of thing. Walking through the airport, it's like, oh my gosh. No, I've got this person rummaging through my hair to make sure there's nothing hidden in there.
She's got a knife.
Yeah. It's
All right. So I got an airplane question for you.
airplane?
Yeah. How much does a 747 weigh?
Oof.
I have no idea.
Give me an answer.
I'd say 50 tons? 50 tons. I'll go with that. Final answer.
I'll go with 200.
All right. Same question, but this time talk to each other. Talk to each other.
Okay.
Try to figure it out.
Um,
You gave a very different answers.
Yeah.
So there
Yeah.
must be something behind it, hopefully.
Okay.
Right? And so talk it out.
well, it's got roughly like a aluminum type frame where it's a lot lighter, but the engines are kind of heavy.
Okay.
And
I
it
have-
holds a lot of people.
And that's what I'm like, are we talking 747 leaving Florida or 747 leaving like California or
All right.
something? Are these hipsters or Floridians?
Talk it out. This is good. This is the right thing to do. Talk it out. Talk it out. What? Yeah.
Are these hipsters or Floridians? Because like Floridians, if the obesity rate, it's like,
Yeah, I was gonna say the
That's-
Floridians are a little heavier.
I'm leaning more towards your weight, 200 tons.
Okay. So you hit on a good thing. So you're talking about weight of passengers, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So do you know how many passengers a 747 holds?
I presume, based on my airplane experience, I think it's
There's a reason for all this.
okay.
Yeah.
We're going. It's like dance monkey dance. We're in grad school. We're used to this. It's I think it's like 50 rows. I think in a 747.
Is it 50 rows?
I think so.
So go with that.
I was thinking like
I'm-
close to 300 people.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's 50 rows. They do 4, 3, and 3. So that's 10.
10.
So
So 500.
500.
Yes.
500.
So you got 500 people. How
And
much do they weigh?
Each weighs like, on average, I'd say
Two.
again
or-
200 if we're going Florida. Go Florida.
You're gonna have some kids. Might not be sold out.
I would say average on 150.
Average around 150.
Okay.
Okay, with
Yeah.
COVID plane even lighter, but
Yeah.
Okay.
150 multiplied by 500. That's like what?
You don't have to do the actual math. I'm more
Okay.
interested in the thought process.
yeah,
Okay. So what else?
150, 500
Luggage.
Luggage.
Luggage
Yep.
about
50 pounds for a check bag. Not everyone's checking a bag.
Yeah.
Good.
And then over carry-ons,
Carry-ons are like what? 20
light.
pounds?
Yeah, they ain't
Max.
much. But I'm like, more people carry on than check though, especially in the U.S.
So what would you say? Like
It's like international flight, you're checking a bag. Domestic flight, more people are carrying on.
say like 40 pounds per person on average, because some people pack together and all that.
Yeah, I'd say maybe less. Maybe it's like 30.
30 pounds a person.
30 pounds is heavy, right?
Yeah, 30
Yeah.
pounds is heavy.
Yeah.
I'm like, with a carry-on's not
I,
tipping 20.
I recently traveled and I thought my
Yeah.
bag that my daughter and I went to New Orleans together. We packed this big duffel bag,
Yeah.
filled it up, and I thought it was going to be close to 50 pounds. It was actually 35 pounds
Yep.
on the scale. So a carry-on's probably going to be considerably lighter, right?
Yeah, that's why I'm
Okay.
like, each carry-on's like 20. Like, I estimate.
Okay, so now back to your frame. How you going to estimate the weight of that frame times all those people?
How
Well,
long?
It has to be able to support all that weight together. So
So
I don't know how to estimate that.
And then, so think, what do you think's average length?
Average
Let's do it by
we could do it off people too.
Yeah,
How big the frame would have to be to hold all those people?
yeah. So again, we talking JetBlue or we talking Spirit? We talking Spirit or JetBlue?
Yeah,
Maybe-
there's a big difference.
Right.
No knee space. No
Yep.
leg space.
I'm like, up to my ears, or are we stretching out here?
What do you say? Like for 3 seats, about 7 feet, 8 feet.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how are you gonna estimate
8,
the
16.
weight of that frame for 3-4 people?
Let's see. So do it by row then, right? And then we'll add for cockpit afterwards.
Yeah.
So if we're saying 50 rows,
50 rows.
right? What's the space in between each seat?
I would say like 2.5.
2.5 feet. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good. That's like a United Southwest, right? So we're going 2.5 feet. So
Two and a half times 10.
2.5 times 50 rows.
No, 2.5 sideways.
Oh, sideways. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
2.5 times 10, so 10 seats in a row.
Yep.
Oh, what? 250 feet.
Yeah. Yep. So
That sounds really big.
So what can you equivalate? You know, since you don't know the metal for the plane, what can you approximate? Maybe for every 3-4 people, the weight of something metal.
3 or 4 people. A car?
A car.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you're saying, yeah, oh, that'd be a good way to estimate it. So if you're saying it's like,
Well, car has a lot of extra, like engine and all that.
Well, you have cargo space on a plane and all that.
Oh,
and
true.
wings.
Yeah. I think it would so
So what? 2 tons?
per 3 to 4 people.
I'm talking about
Right,
like a
3,
small
4.
car, like, you know.
Well, if it's, remember, the 3 are 3 and 3, so that's like your average, sedan or something like that could fit that, including the console, right? But if you're talking 4 and 4, that's more like a minivan, right?
All right. So let me tell you why we just did this exercise. All right.
Okay.
Because when I was a postdoc looking to go for a faculty position, I started attending a lot of workshops and getting a job in academia. What are they looking for? Working on your cover letter, working on your CV, working on whatever, and practicing interview questions, things like that. And then I went to a workshop on getting a job in industry. Even though I had no interest in getting a job in industry, I figured I might still learn something, and it was something that changed my life. Because the guy who was leading that workshop, he worked as a consultant for top Fortune 100 companies, and his job was to hire people into this company, which intrigued me. You have obviously a very successful company if you're in the top 100 Fortune 100 companies, right?
Yeah.
So wouldn't you want somebody in the company to hire people because you know what they need to do? Right? But it was fascinating to me that they would hire an external consultant to hire people for their company that doesn't necessarily know what that company does, right? So I mean, I'm already impressed by this guy that he landed this kind of gig, right?
Yeah.
And so he asked us that same question. There were about a dozen or so of us that had our PhD in the biomedical sciences attending this workshop at Penn, and so we had a sheet of paper and pencil in front of us, and he asked us that same question. He's like, go ahead and take a few minutes, write down an answer. And when he went around the room, we did the same thing you guys did the first time, right? I guess this.
Yep.
And we didn't have a reason. There was none of us had a real rationale. We just kind of threw out a number.
Yep.
And our excuse ultimately was, it's not in our area of expertise.
Yeah.
Right? We have a PhD in neuroscience, microbiology, immunology, whatever. I don't know how much an airplane weighs.
Yeah.
And why should I have to know that? And his logic for asking that question, he says, this is a question I ask on my interviews. He goes, I'm hiring people for this company. The people that are applying for the kind of positions that I'm hiring all have MBAs. They all have MBAs from fantastic institutions. So how do I compare the MBA from Princeton, MIT, Stanford, Duke? Everyone has fantastic work experience. So how do I compare the project that this person developed versus the one that this one led? How do I compare these projects? He goes, every one of these people has very similar qualifications. They could, they can all probably do the current job at the company now.
Yeah.
But what the company's asking me to do is hire somebody that's going to work and manage this company in the years to come. And in the years to come, the company is going to experience this challenges. They're going to experience challenges that they've never encountered before. And so what I want to know is, how are you going to handle something that you've never had to experience before? And that's why I asked you how much this plane weighs. Because this is, I want to know what's going to happen when you're faced with a challenge that you have no experience in. Are you going to buckle and say, this is out of my area of expertise? Are you going to throw a guess out there? Or are you going to break it down and solve the problem? And,
Yeah.
and so when I interview people, most candidates throw out a simple answer.
Yeah.
And they just kind of take a guess. And he goes, but every once in a while I get a candidate, in the interview who says, can I take a second to think about this? And they're like, yeah, sure. Go ahead. In fact, I encourage you to think out loud.
I was close.
And so they start thinking out loud. And he says, that's what I'm interested. I'm interested in the thought process because I want to know how you're going to be able to move this company forward doing this. Because all of you have a PhD in the biomedical sciences. Because do you go to your lab and think, I'm going to do an experiment, but I don't know what to do. So let me just add a little bit of this, add a little bit of that. You don't do that, right?
Yeah.
You go to the literature. You look for what's the next the next baby step I can do to advance this. And I need to design my experiment out carefully so that my interpretation can only derive from the difference I see in my experimental versus my controls. Because this is how you design your experiments and how you do your work. He says, so why is it that when I ask you something that's out of your area of expertise, you just kind of throw your hands in the air and be like, I don't know. Because why aren't you applying the same principles that you apply in the lab to everyday life and the challenges you experience in everyday life? And it blew my mind. I was like, and I was embarrassed. I was like, why don't I apply those same approach to everything in my life? And so I think for me it was a very eye-opening experience that when I have a new challenge in my life, I need to not be overwhelmed by it, to recognize it's out of my area of expertise, but think, how can I break this down?
Break it down.
And how can I solve the problem? How can I advance towards solving the problem? So, fantastic. And you know what's neat is that program Teach for America?
Yep.
All right. Super prestigious program if you get selected for it, right?
Yep.
What are you going to do if you get selected for it? You're going to get shipped out to some minority serving school that doesn't have resources, and you're going to teach there for a couple of years, and they're going to help pay some of your loans for college, right?
Yep.
But the way this program got started, total scam. It's a total scam. I loved it. The way this program got started was an undergraduate honors thesis in sociology at Princeton, and the student, Princeton, every student has to do like a mini thesis kind of thing to graduate, right? And so the student in sociology proposed doing this, that she was going to get people from Ivy League institutions to go work at minority serving institutions, schools, and teach for a year or so as service before they go out and get their real job. And her major professor was like, yeah, who's going to do this, right? who's going to do that, right? Some of these students are graduating with $200,000-$300,000 in debt. How are they going to give up a year of their life to go work at a school why would they choose to go teach at a school that doesn't have chalk or a dry erase board or markers or supplies for the teachers, right? Why would you choose to? These schools already have a problem hiring people. Why would somebody voluntarily go there when you could go somewhere else? Yep. Especially if you're Ivy League educated, go somewhere else, right? That's going to be a better life for you. And he challenged her, says you need to find a way to make this so that people will desire to do it. And so what they came up with together was this idea of make it competitive, make it something desirable that most people can't achieve. So they only initially opened it up to Ivy League institutions, and then they opened it up to higher tier institutions, the Duke, Stanford kind of things, and then they opened it up to all. Right, but over years, much like Facebook did, right?
Yep.
They opened it up exclusively to some schools first, all right, make it desirable, and so by doing that, it's launched into this incredibly well-funded, program, and makes a change every day in people's lives, and is a fantastic resource. One of the questions they asked in their interview, was, how many windows are there in New York City? Now, to me, that's a shut you down kind of question.
Yeah,
right? That's a question right away. I'm instantly overwhelmed. I don't know.
Yep.
I'm not sure the population of New York City. If I had to take a guess, let's say so many million, right?
Yep.
7 million. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know what number that is. But how many windows would people have per apartment or condo per an average of people living in a unit. But you have to work your way through. But
Yeah.
that's the kind of question that shuts most applicants down.
Yeah.
They immediately are like, I don't know. And this is to get a job where you're going to go work at a school that's not going to give you the resources you need to succeed, right?
Yeah,
that's the
but
kind of
that's
question.
part of it, right? Like
Yeah.
you have to backwards engineer your way into getting something
Yeah,
to work.
yeah.
You know, it's like a lot of the equipment we use is very, very expensive, but we don't always have the funding to get like the top-notch stuff. So it's like, how do you
Mm-hmm.
make sure that and test each and every piece, make sure it's working and that
Yeah,
sort of thing.
Honestly, a lot of our equipment now comes from eBay.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's just the point of fact.
At
they-
like a fraction of the price that a new one costs. So
Yeah, because it's like, and some of the equipment's like old. Like if you want to reproduce your experiment and use the same thing, like keeping your materials the same, keeping your equipment the same is like an important part. And so if you want to keep replicating the experiment, you better use the same kind of stimulator from like 40 years ago, which you can only get off eBay.
Otherwise,
And
you
it
got
might
to
not
change
work,
everything, right? You got to
And
change
it might
all,
not
right?
work.
And that
So
sucks, right?
yeah, so it's
Who wants to take a few months to work something out?
exactly.
Let's get pour a little more
Exactly.
apple juice here.
That's fine. It's apple juice. So I think that right now, yeah, it's 9:14. Wow. So I think, are there any good questions on Twitch? We'll ask our audience if you have your burning questions for Dr. Munoz, anything that he's spoken about or anything you might be interested in. Post your questions on Twitch and YouTube now. Paul is going to scour a few of those. I'll look at YouTube. And the first question, though, I did get one on social media. There's a lot of talk on, especially from students and even adults, how much sleep do you need to function? Because undergrads are going through the thing where it's like, they're studying, they're trying to eat, and then they're, doing all these things. I think it was, what was it? Study, social life, sleep, choose any two.
Yeah, right.
And survive.
Right.
So how much sleep does your brain actually need to keep functioning?
There's so many studies that have been done on sleep. But first thing I'm going to tell you is I don't do research on sleep. I have some friends do, but if I was a better friend, I'd be more familiar about their research. But and even to that point, neuroscience is a very broad field. And I don't like most of neuroscience. I like a very small percentage of neuroscience.
Sure.
I think that's probably true for most people in any field, right? You probably really love a small area,
Yeah.
and then the rest you don't give a damn about. And then there's a part of it that you do give a damn about. You're interested in, and
Yeah.
you'll listen to it, but you're not going to research it on your own, right? But with sleep, I do know that there are people that really.
Gotta change the ice.
Yeah, there are people that that need 8 hours. There are people that need 6 hours, right? And there are people that will function just fine of 6 hours, and people that will function, that need 8 hours, right? It all depends on whether you're that person or not. There's some genetic testing you can do, figure out which SNP variants you are, which are associated with short versus longer term sleep. But the bottom line is, you do what you got to do, man. If you know you're messing up, well, you get more sleep. It's more important. The pulling an all-nighter never works, right? You will perform better because you can think more clearly when you're not sleep deprived, and oftentimes that's more important than actually knowing the answer to being able to figure it out. But it's still a hard thing to do in practice, right? Even knowing that truth, it's still hard because you think, man, what if I study 5 more minutes, I might see the answer to a question that's going to be on the test.
Yep.
So I appreciate in practice, it's really hard to do.
Yep.
And I pulled my share of all-nighters. I did it through undergrad. I did it through grad school. In fact, those other 2 guys that ended up dropping out of the program, they're the ones who carried me through a lot of the classes. We'd get together on the weekends and we'd study we'd pull an all-nighter once a week, just to keep up with the material. And that's, my normal day was work in the lab from 8 to about 5. For the first year, my PI wanted me in that lab 8 to 5. And then, unless I was in class. And then after that, I would go get some dinner, and then I'd study until around midnight or so, and then go to bed and start the next day over. And that worked for me. You got to, you know how much sleep you need, and you know if you're getting enough. So
Yeah, and I feel like for some people, like, Some of my parents' friends, they say it's like, oh, well, I read online that like 6 hours is all you need, so I'll make my body work and adjust it to that.
Here's the thing. I'm 51 years old, right?
Uh-huh.
I'm divorced. I have my kids 50% of the time. On the nights I have my kids, we go to bed early, typically during the school year, right? We'll go to bed around 9, wake up around 6:30. And those nights I'm getting how much sleep? 6, 7, 8.
Yeah,
you know,
8 hours.
9 hours of sleep,
yeah.
right? That's on the nights I don't have the kids, I'm stupid. I'm 51 years old and I'm immature and I'm stupid. And on the nights I don't have them, you know, on that third night, I'll drop them off at school at 7:30 in the morning, and then I'll stay up that night until 1 or 2 in the morning, pushing myself beyond exhaustion, watching Netflix, catching up on the shows I want to watch when I don't get to watch when the kids are there or whatever. And I'm stupid, right? And I'll stay up, and then I'm totally sleep deprived on the days I don't have them, and then I catch up on my sleep on the days I have. Yeah, I wish I could tell you to be more disciplined, but
Yeah.
I'd be a total hypocrite if I told you I had it figured out. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that's how we work too, Paul. It's like, I think that's how most people work. It's like, do you have family visiting? You got, things going on and parties going on. You're gonna push yourself.
Right.
You're not gonna sleep. And then it's like, oh, do you have a, committee or proposal to do the next day? You're not gonna be sleep deprived for that.
I'll tell you this though. There's some really fascinating research that's come out in the last handful of years, looking at clearance of beta amyloid, which is a component of the plaques that form during Alzheimer's disease. Right? And a lot of us think of Alzheimer's disease as this old person's disease, right? Something you get when you're 80 or 70 or something like that, right? But the reality is, those plaques are forming in your brain now, and we all form plaques in our brain. And the thing is, when you're younger, you have more antibodies against it, which help clear out those plaques. And you're able to remove those a lot better. But to think that Alzheimer's disease is something that develops when you're old is you're fooling yourself. It's developing now. It's the behavioral changes are manifesting after the neurological changes have manifested, and that's what the behavioral stuff's happening when you're old. And so a lot of studies in the past few years have shown that during sleep we clear out a lot of this beta amyloid. And so if you're depriving yourself of sleep now, you're increasing the odds of having dementia and problems like that in the future. Because sleep disruption is one of the common things associated with Alzheimer's. Yeah.
Nice.
I do have one question. Do you have a favorite book that you would recommend to people?
That's a tough one, And I'll tell you why that's tough is because, I think books speak to us based on where we are in our lives at the time. And so there are some books that I've read when I was younger that really greatly impacted me, and I've gone back to reread them now that I'm older, and I'm like, what the fuck was I thinking? I was like, did I believe this? Did I think this was good? I mean, so it all depends on where you are in your stage of life when you're reading something in particular. But the first book that I read again, right? The first book that I read back to back, and I actually read it. I did read it back to back. I finished it and I started it again. That same way.
Wow.
It was a book called Hunger, and it was it's by a Norwegian author who doesn't have the best history. Don't look at his history.
Hey, sometimes the most colorful history paints the best book, right?
But this book called Hunger was about this guy who is kind of becoming mentally unstable and going down this downward spiral as he's running out of money and can't afford a place to live anymore, can't afford food, and the whole book is these conversations effectively he's having with himself in his head as he's approaching strangers and what he thinks other people are thinking of him, and it's pretty insightful, because we're all always thinking about what other people might be thinking of us, whether we want to admit it or not, right?
Yep.
But it's that book Hunger was one of the most powerful books I read when I was around your guys' age. Right?
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And, I want to thank Dr. Munoz. We're rounding down. It's been, it's like all of a sudden, hour and a half passes.
Yeah.
And I want to thank Dr. Munoz for being our first official guest on the podcast. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your time. And this is, again, like, if anyone, if you really like Dr. Munoz, comment and do things and like it, and we'll get him back on sometime. And it was really, really great having you on.
Cool, man. Glad to be here.
Thank you. And next week is going to be no exception. Actually, it's one of Dr. Munoz's colleagues, Dr. Rob Smith, is going to be on next week.
He's very dynamic. He's going to be a very high energy speaker. Yeah.
Yeah, he's going to be on via Zoom because he lives a lot further away than Dr. Munoz does. I was like, there's no way I'm tempting you up here.
No excuse, Rob, man. Get in your car and drive, man. What century are we in? Get in your car and drive. Commit to it. Right? None of this, my belly hurts. I'm going to do it from home.
See?
Would you have done it from home before COVID when we didn't have Zoom available? No, you'd have done it or not, right?
Yeah.
So, I'm just saying, step up, Rob.
Gauntlet been thrown down. So right now, Dr. Rob Smith is going to visit us via Zoom, but maybe he'll come in person. But join us next week, 8 p.m., and it's going to be all about, he's a microbiologist, and he's coming to talk to us about COVID vaccine, and all that sort of stuff. And a little bit about him, because as you can see, university professors, I think that's one of the take-homes of this that I really wanted to illustrate. I think some people just keep their heads down and go through college and think all their professors were robots. And I mean, some of them are, but most of them have so many different dimensions to them if you just take the time to, talk to them. And to the professors, take time to talk to your students because you inspire them as well when you're in their class. I don't want to say how many years since I've been in Dr. Munoz's class, but I went to a high school.
Hey, man, AARP's got some good discounts, though, right?
It's like my nickname in the lab is Boomer because I'm like, good grief. I get such a hard time around.
You're not great with technology.
No, and I'm not great with technology, which makes it even worse. They're like, oh, Boomer couldn't figure it out. Oh, here, it's like 2 steps. I'm like, oh, no. But no, I want to thank Dr. Munoz for being here. Dr. Rob Smith is going to be joining us next week at 8 p.m., same time on Wednesday night. So hopefully you join us then. And for that, thank you, Dr. Munoz, for joining us. Salud. And Paul, it's all great, buddy.
Oh, well, before we end, we have to do wise words.
Oh, I just did wise words. Listen to your professors, right? Talk to them. Go to their office hours. Bother them.
I think I got some wise words. Or wise word.
Wise word?
Persistence.
There
you go.
There you go.
All right. Thanks for joining us, guys. We're going to end it here. And we'll see you next week.
Good night.